Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Neon, and oh my god, we're going to do another video talking about tabletop, talking about Dungeons and Dragons, talking about the media attacking Dungeons and Dragons. This is coming from PBS. This is actually WPSU, a Penn State PBS station, local station. Actually, it's there in the Pennsylvania area, and god, this is embarrassing. This is just an embarrassing article. We're going to talk about this. They're coming for Gary Gygax now, and I predicted this was going to happen. Oh my God, a year or two ago. I said they're going to find D&D problematic, and then they're going to turn on Gary Gygax, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're going back and linking the PDFs of old Dragon magazines from the early 80s to prop up their flimsy arguments. And this is the utter state of tabletop gaming current year. It's a disaster, guys. Like, this whole scene is beyond parody. I'm sorry. It is. I can't believe what I have seen in the inclusive tabletop gaming community. People getting blacklisted, canceled, whatever cancel culture we talk about in the comic book industry, multiply it by 10. For tabletop. It is one of the most locked down, compromised, weird ass scenes out there. And it's not hyperbole. It's not me being over dramatic. This article is one of many articles that people have been, new gamers mostly, I would say probably 5e gamers, have been writing about. Old school gamers, OSR gamers, have been writing about Dungeons and Dragons. This is why Hasbro made the idiotic decision to get rid of race and had to address monsters being racist and all this other crap because of these college kids writing garbage like this, whether it's for PBS or writing it for like Polygon or Vice or whatever. And they're just not going to let it. They're not going to let it die. Like, it seems like every time D&D gets any headlines for anything, whether it's Stranger Things or for one D&D, they have to glom on to that because they know people are searching for Dungeons and Dragons and they can get their hot takes in there. And this is basically the Tumblr crowd. This is the crowd that Critical Role has cultivated. Now, I don't blame Critical Role per se. We actually met Matt Mercer back in the day. He seemed like a pretty decent guy, I'm going to be honest, but so weird. I mean, I think a lot of these gamers came from Tumblr, and it's very appropriate that Tumblr's logo has a lowercase t, because this is kind of like low T D&D. So we're going to talk about this. Before we get into it any further, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. Over 284,000 subs. Thank you so much for the support. We've been talking a lot about tabletop gaming over the last couple months because things are getting hella weird. They're getting very weird, and I think, again, a lot of this comes down to one D&D being talked about at length, and the Dungeons and Dragons movie coming out, and Stranger Things being popular. And basically anytime D&D cracks the mainstream media, that's when all the hit pieces come out. That's when the satanic panic starts all over again. Have to give a shout out to Cinder Shadow, who actually sent me this link on Twitter. I missed this. This is ridiculous. This is coming from freaking PBS. But I shouldn't be surprised. I saw this the other day before I get into the article, that people who play D&D currently, they're complaining about the dice. They said that D20s are gatekeeping. You can love them, but most people outside the hobby don't have them. So requiring them to play your game is kind of rough. The more accessible your tools, D6, playing cards, tokens, the easier it is for new folks to learn without someone to open the gate for them. And I had to point out that you can buy a full set of gaming dice for under $5 on Amazon. You can get them cheaper than that. Walmart has them. I think you can buy them for a couple bucks. They're not expensive. And people are complaining about the barrier to entry for D&D on their cell phones, on their smartphones, and how much you paying for that, Anyway, that's the mentality of current year gamers. So they talk about how popular D&D is, of course, and that's why they're doing this hit piece, right? So we get down to this, and this is where I started to get pissed off. They're talking about how, there hasn't been a lot of representation in D&D, and the new guard of hobby geeks are highly aware, and if they're not directly by POC people, they're allies. Basically, they're woke, right? That's I don't know what else to say. That's the term, right? If you start using terms like that, that's the term. But then we get down to this, and this really pisses me off. Again, everybody going on about Stranger Things, everybody going on about Eddie in Stranger Things in particular. He played a completely different game than what is being offered right now, and these people would have attacked him. I guarantee you. All these people oohing and eyeing over Eddie and the representation that gamers are being seen on. No, they would have absolutely positively joined in and dogpiled him. They would have helped hunt him down. He would have been the devil, right? Maybe not physically hurt him, but they would have absolutely participated in deplatforming him because he's a wrong thinker. So here we go. Even within these gaming communities, there's friction. Old school Renaissance, or OSR, is a gaming movement whose players claim they are against outside politics permeating their game space. These players support the use of traditional fantasy tropes in game design. How dare they? Such as the existence of good and evil races with no nuance. OSR gamers are often seen as the old guard of tabletop gaming and tend to idealize the past, which defaults to a white masculine worldview. You have always been free to play the game any way you want to play it. Always. Always. Going back to freaking Red Box, first edition AD&D, you can play the game however the hell you want to play it. This is a disgusting hit piece. And it's only a few days after we did a video talking about Troll Lord games being attacked on Twitter by the mob because they said that they wanted to be apolitical. Something is going on. There's a coordinated something going on somewhere. I don't know if it's Wizards. I don't know if it's like the Gen Con bunch or like the Portland Tabletop Mafia or what the hell is going on. But there's something coordinated going on because all of these attacks and articles are all happening in lockstep. And it's all leading up to 1D&D coming out, which I hate to break it to you, 1D&D is going to start gouging players like big time. And your OSR fans are not going to have your back. They're not going to have your back. So you guys wanted D&D, you get D&D. You want to go to another system that's more like actual D&D, you might have a little bit of trouble, especially if you're demonizing old school gamers. But you know what? We're used to it. We were demonized in school. We were bullied in school. We were called Satanists in school. And this is the same thing, the exact same thing happening all over again. Created in the 70s, Dungeons & Dragons is the first and most prominent tabletop RPG. Race has been key in character design. When players create their in-game personas, they generally choose different aspects from a menu that culminates in an imaginary character with a history. They have to explain it to you. The history, personality, physical traits, and special talents. Characters can be one of many races, such as humans, elves, and dwarves. These character types could be considered various species. Some resemble real animals, while others are more like dragons or angels. But the different beings have always been racially coded, according to Dashel, with humans specifically having always been seen as an analog for white, except in the campaign worlds where they're not. D&D has a tradition of promoting humans as the best or most versatile characters. No, most versatile, yes. Best, not necessarily. Gary, here it comes, guys. I told you. Gary Gygax, creator of Dungeons & Dragons, one of the creators of D&D, by the way, one of the creators, was a self-described biological determinist. He believed that different races of people were biologically distinct and capable of different things in life. No, he believed in the Tolkien-esque differences between humans and demi-human races. And he gave the characteristics to those characters that Tolkien gave to those characters in the books. Elves were better at magic. They're better at, with dexterity and archery. They're better suited to doing those sorts of things, certain jobs, because of the race they are. They're not stand-ins for humans. They're elves. They're not humans. Dwarves, same thing. Stockier, good fighters. Not good with magic, right? Usually. Orcs are bad guys. They were bad guys in Tolkien. They were bad guys. They're not human. They're not stand-ins for humans. They're not coded in any way. Holy hell. This is torture. This can be seen in early D&D with non-humans or demi-humans having level caps. This means that in early editions of the rules, non-human characters could never achieve the same degree of growth as human characters. That was to keep the game balanced. Because those characters were better. They had advantages over humans, but the trade-off is that they couldn't advance as high as humans could advance. That's not a racist thing. That was to keep your your elf or your dwarf from being completely ridiculously OP and not even needing humans in the party. You know, the trade-off for playing a non-human character with statistical advantages was that you had to give something else up, which was you couldn't hit as high of a level as your human counterparts. And you really didn't have to, because a maxed out elf or dwarf character was pretty damn powerful, right? Additionally, orcs were initially created as a group of bestial humanoids with the sole purpose of being killed by players. Yes, they came from Tolkien. The classic evil race could not be chosen by players for their character until 1993, with the release of the complete book of humanoids, which I think was a huge mistake. And if we had a time machine, we should go back and undo that. The source book for the second edition of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, the works of Tolkien are credited as an inspiration. No duh. Over the years and through subsequent editions of the game, these racial allusions have generally been minimized. In the summer of 2020, amid a reckoning on race and inclusion throughout many industries, I wonder what that is, Wizards of the Coast released a statement outlining steps it was taking to help everyone feel at home around the game table. But for every 2 steps forward, they take 1 step back, they said, citing a recent publication's inclusion of a simian race of humanoids reminiscent of an old minstrel shows. They were bards. They were flying monkey people that have been in the game for a while. They were actually, I believe, in Hadosian. I think they were in Star Frontiers. They were called something else. And they were bards. They weren't minstrels. They were bards. Wizards of the Coast also recently presented a new vernacular for the upcoming rule change to the game, replacing race with species. At best, I think this is an earnest appeal to fans that WotC is taking the representation of race seriously in its games. You can always change it. You don't have to play by their rules. But at worst, I really think that may quash some of the important dialogue that is happening around the topic within fan communities. There is no important dialogue taking place in the fan community. The fan community wants to be left alone. They don't want to drag politics into the game. The only people that are interested in dragging all of these real world problems and real world politics into the games are news outlets like this and people who live on Twitter and the Portland tabletop mafia. Other than that, nobody gives a shit. They just want to play their game. Most of this shit is being ignored by a lot of people. The reason so many people are opting for OSR instead of current year D&D, Hasbro owned D&D, is because of this shit. This is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. But you can't even say that you want to be apolitical. We saw what happened with Troll Lord Games just last week. Hey guys, our games are for everyone. We're going to be apolitical. We don't think that the gaming table is a place to be having these conversations. And didn't Twitter descend on them? You know, this has happened so many times in the past. Hell, I got thrown under the bus by the guy who did Basic Fantasy because he was afraid, apparently, of being associated with me because I've got hot takes about the tabletop gaming industry, and he was afraid he was going to get dogpiled, so I got fed to the wolves. Now, he kind of sort of quasi-apologized, but the damage was done, and I haven't touched his game since, and I can't really recommend it to other people. But he's part of the OSR community. You know what I'm saying? Like, the reason there are so many alternatives popping up is that people who have played these games for decades are tired of this bullshit. And a lot of us, those of us that are older, those of us that played in the 80s and 90s, remember what it was like being attacked and demonized by the Karens and the cheerleaders and the preppies and you're doing it. You're doing it right now. You're not being bullied. You're doing the bullying. The issue was never really race, but essentialism. And essentialism is baked into the system of D&D. It's in its DNA. Well, then play a different game. Play Yahtzee. Play Monopoly. Go play something else. Obviously, this game's not for you. Just go play something else. If it's so problematic that the entire game is corrupted by racial essentialism or whatever the hell term you're coming up with, don't play the game. For God's sake, go find something else to do and leave people who actually enjoy the game. Let them enjoy the game. You don't have to be a part of it. You don't have to play the game. If you think it's racist, don't play it. If you think it's okay, but there are things that you would change, like orcs or whatever, then change it at your table. But to demand that the entire scene change for you when you probably just showed up like last week is completely ridiculous. This is what we keep seeing time and time again. I think many people would consider a completely different game as race species gives advantages and disadvantages. There needs to be checks and balances for parity, consistency, and fun. Yeah, it would be. Some game systems outside of D&D are doing away with race as a defining aspect of characters altogether. Well, fine, good for them. This is just absolutely ridiculous. They're talking about all the game companies that are trying to get the stamp of approval from Twitter and the Portland Tabletop Mafia and the journalists. I mean, this is just ridiculous. Now they get down to so here's the thing. They're all like, oh, Wizards is, this and Wizards is that, and Dungeons & Dragons is problematic. Then they get to the meat of it, which is everybody can agree on this. D&D is under monetized. We're going to start bleeding the players dry. But we're going to start doing homebrew games. Yeah, okay, what is it? If D&D is problematic, it's problematic because of the racism. It's problematic because they're going to start bleeding their players dry. And you're going to move to homebrew systems, which are basically OSR anyway, or you can just do your own thing. Why the fuck did you write this article in the first place? Other than to throw shade at people you don't like, trying to enjoy the hobby the way it was 20 or 30 years ago. They're not affecting you in any way. They're not affecting you in any way. They've already checked out. They've already moved on to other things. But you can't stand it. We've seen time and time again, they can't stand it. Very aggravating. Just you do you, boo. You play the game you want to play. Don't play the game you don't want to play. I don't care what the hell you do with your free time. Just let others enjoy their hobbies the way they want to enjoy them. If it's not hurting you, whatever, right? Gonna wrap it up. Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, and we'll talk later.